Breaking news, folks, breaking news. Small Business Superhero Podcast has just landed.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, and with us today, we have Mr. Justin Kennedy, who is our current resident IT guru, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how he got started in the IT game and how you can secure your identity when you're doing your work online. Justin, how are you, bud?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm still kicking and screaming. I got no complaints whatsoever. So talk to me a little bit about how you got started in the IT game.
So in high school, I was kind of, liked the engineering mind, things like that. Was interested in computers, didn't have one. We had some friends of ours that worked at a company downtown Winston, and they did it for a living. And they would bring like little parts home here and there and show us how to build computers, and it kind of clicked with me. So we started building and playing computer games, things like that. And then, dealing into the internet side of it, we had one of the first DSL lines in Winston-Salem. We had a modem for that. We had to set all that up in networking, so I got into that a little bit. So just every aspect as I got to kind of unfold it kind of became more and more interesting. So I kind of ran with it.
When you say you had the first DSL line in Winston, was that the company or was that something that you guys installed?
We installed. It was a type of internet you could get at the time that was mostly available to businesses, but we were one of the first homes that had it.
Now that kind of ran through phone lines, right?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And so after doing that type of work, where did you go from there?
I did retail management for a long time, actually, because I wanted a temperature-controlled environment until I could find an IT job.
Climate control.
Got some certifications. Reached out from various jobs. Used to install point-of-sale register systems for a health food store chain and some other chains, and some out of Statesville, kind of mostly computer-based. So you got to kind of learn computers, peripherals, how they interact. Went to work at my current job at Novant Health and in the patient access department, so I could transfer into IT when there was a position available, and I was able to transfer in, and I've pretty much been doing that full time ever since. I've been doing freelance work on the side for many, many years, not as much as I used to, but with my kids getting older, being teenagers, things like that, you're succumbed to a lot of things. Your family always reaches out to you. You're the resident IT person for your family and everybody else.
True story.
I've got friends that have businesses that always reach out to me for advice or consulting or whatever to try to figure out the best way to do whatever it is they want to do, or they see something that someone else is doing and say, hey, how do I do that? And that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've got a family member. My brother-in-law is a mechanic and an excellent one for years. His whole adult life he's been a mechanic, and I noticed that, hey, can you listen to this and tell me what it might be? Turns into, hey, can you look at it? Hey, okay, so can you come with me to buy the part? Would you mind helping me put the part in? Oh, thanks for putting that part in. And that's there. His Saturday is gone. And the idea of money changing hands never came up.
Yeah, it's the family obligation.
It's like I've noticed that everyone under the sun does that to him, and he's such a great sport about it. So your freelance IT stuff that you do on the side, how did you get that started, and how's it going?
It's mostly just friends. So I worked with someone at my previous job that opened his own store, so I did work there, and then he usually recommends me out when people can't find somebody that's competent, or it's really there are definitely niche markets and places you can go to for a broken computer, things like that. But sometimes when you need something more creative or multiple things to work together, you kind of have to find a specialist person.
What's the most complicated job that you've had to tackle so far on the freelance end of things?
Probably setting up Travis's whole back-end server. And
really?
Yeah.
That's it? We've got the blue ribbon around here.
It was pretty intense.
Here. El Jefe's got the number one spot.
Coming out of the cloud space back on-prem for a little bit, trying to save some money as well as securing it, things like that. So it was definitely a challenge to accommodate everybody, get all the users connected, everything else. And at some point we're moving back to the cloud, but it's fine. It's a natural progression of things. Good
stuff. Now, you've been doing this a long time. Do you still enjoy it?
I do, very much so.
So do you still have like a favorite part, a favorite thing?
No, I mean, I like anything that presents a new challenge. I mean, I just recently overly networked my house, and if you ever want to see your teenage kids scream, take a perfectly functioning network and tear it all down and rebuild it and have to work through kinks for 2 weeks. And
these things happen.
Definitely draws attention.
You did what? It happens. So, but as far as having a favorite part of it, you said that you'd enjoy anything that's a new challenge.
So my key role and what I've been in for a while, even in my main job, is an architect. So IT systems architect. So the piece of architecture that I like is you have to know a little bit about everything. So you're not a specialist in anything. You work with people in different departments, but you know enough to say, okay, this will work on the surface. And then you go to somebody and say, okay, how can we make this work?
Okay.
And then you kind of get involved in that part and you learn a little more and you keep moving. But it gives you that every aspect, from the network stack to the storage stack to servers to desktops to endpoints to mobile devices, whatever it is, you kind of get a little taste of everything. And it's just kind of cool to see how that interconnects and be able to come up with solutions that way.
Does it get easier to find solutions with the relentless march of progress in technology, or does it become more complicated?
It's much easier to find solutions. It's much harder to sustain support for solutions.
Gotcha.
A lot of companies get bought, devices go out of support, and you have to come up with a new support. So there's definitely a lot more out there to choose from. But the problem with that is, these companies merge, they don't sustain, or these devices go out of date, and you have to come up with something new down the road.
You mean I can't get support for my Windows XP anymore? I blame Justin.
It is completely not fair.
Good stuff. Now, you and I were talking offline before we started the podcast, and you said that you get a lot of questions about cybersecurity. And
yeah, more in personal security, as far as your identity online, how do I protect it? As we make things more accessible, everything's more accessible. As things are more accessible for convenience, it becomes less secure. So the more data you put out there, the more data is accessible to, nefarious people that want to get it. You can get to it, but so can, it does add the chance of somebody else being able to get to it.
And we have spoken before on the channel about how people are out there actively looking for your information to exploit it.
So, and I think the Cisco report last year was 83% of all successful, what we call scamming or hacking attempts, are through phishing. So phishing is not a new thing. I mean, most people have probably gotten a letter from an Nigerian prince at some point, even before the email, and email got on. And I mean, that's similar to what phishing is. And even though it's spelled PHI, it's very similar to phishing. So somebody puts something out that entices you, you grab onto it, and they reel you in. Nowadays, it's so much easier. We talked a little bit earlier about communication. I mean, more solutions out there. There are also a lot of solutions that help these people kind of get to you.
Oh, yeah. By the time we're done with this podcast, somebody watching it is going to get a text message from Amazon saying that their suspicious purchase was made. Just click here to verify your information.
Well, and what most people think is it's targeted to them because you're the only one that gets it. You have an Amazon account. But the reality is they can use services like SMS aggregators, which are basically online virtual devices that can send out to an entire list, just like an old dialer. They just send out to a whole list of text messages. A Bank of America card has been, used in Russia. Do you approve this? You may not have a Bank of America. You may glance at it and go, I don't have a Bank of America account. This is stupid. I can't believe somebody tried to get me. But someone that does have Bank of America, and you're just betting on it. And then the next day they do Wells Fargo and they run the same thing. So it's not that hard to reach people. It's not that you're siloed on your device. It's not that hard to find something that you're interested in. The big thing people I don't think realize is that a lot of these companies, for example, Facebook. So if you're on Facebook and you like Norton, you like Symantec, which makes Norton an antivirus product because you like their software. There are people that go in and find all the things you like. They can look at it publicly and see that, and they can actually cater those emails to you. You like Norton, you're probably a Norton customer, so let's send you a Norton scamming email that says, your Norton account's been canceled. Please call here. It gets even deeper. People get calls from Microsoft telling them their computer's fixed. I mean, our computer's broken, you have a virus. The reality is
that was a big one at the previous job. We would get those calls a lot, where we'd receive. So they issued us phones for the job, and those phones were constantly getting Microsoft calls. We're Microsoft support. We need you to do this on your computer. Let me in. That kind of thing. And
and you register on these sites to get phone calls, or these, shopping sites that are less than, Wayfair or wherever these places are, and you give them your phone number and they can sell that information to whoever, and those people have your phone number and they can call and text you all they want. And I mean, people don't realize, the reality is Microsoft doesn't care about your computer. They've already made their money once they sell it. They don't care that you get a virus. They're not going to call you. Most people don't know that. I mean, the fear and the stigma of I have a virus is terrifying. I mean, my data is going to be compromised when really you're compromising your data by talking to them.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to explain to people. It happens to people of all ages across the board. I get calls about teenagers. I get calls about adults, older people. It definitely happens more to some. But the reality is they're getting very clever, and they're only going to get more clever. They're only going to try to instill fear in you and try to instill panic, because what they realized a long time ago is you can market to people and try to entice them, but the reality is fear is the biggest driver. If I can convince you that your computer has a virus or your bank account's been stolen or whatever and trick you there, you're much less likely to think about it. You're much less likely to process what's really going on because you're in a panic state, and so you're gonna move as fast as you can to try to keep from losing as much as you can.
Yep, they raise the anxiety level, so the judgment goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the advice that you give people that call you and they want to know, how can I protect myself online?
So the majority of the time, and a lot of websites are moving to this by requirement, and it's multi-factor authentication. And you really want to use your phone if you can. The multi-factor is a great thing because if I want to go reset my password, it has two things it has to check before it can get to me. I can't just get your password and go change your password. I may get your password and get into Amazon, but I can't go into Amazon and change your payments. I can't send something to my house. There's a lot of fail-safes in there that require that second factor. So anytime with Gmail, with your email clients, with Amazon and these places, you can enable that, always enable that. And always use cell phone. Try not to use a secondary email because, and I'm going to get to that next, is the reality is you probably use the same password for both. So if they can get to one, they can get to the other.
So talk to grandma real quick. So grandma doesn't know what multi-factor authentication means.
Okay. So what multi-factor authentication means is that it's going to ask you to put a phone number in as a secondary form of authentication. At the time you try to log into it, usually a new computer, it's going to send you a text message to your phone. And it's going to say, please enter the code that we sent to your text message. What that does is that's telling the system, hey, there's a secondary device out there that person should only have access to, not somebody online, and be able to get this code from to be able to authenticate. The bigger problem, and honestly, probably the more advice I would give you is people struggle with passwords, and people use password saving programs, which, I mean, LastPass, things like that are reputable, but you also have to remember, if you just take if you go look for a password keeper and it's not a reputable source, you may just be giving all your passwords to a company that's, going to use them for whatever they want to use them for.
Mm-hmm.
But the main reality is when you use the same password for everything, it breaks the mold. I mean, it's really, if I made a new website and said, hey, I'm going to give free cat and dog calendars out, all you have to do is register with my site. You go in there and you put in, first thing, I want to know your email address. I want you to set a password with me. Well, all I have to do is store that password in a database. And then later on, I can go back to your email and just check and see if, hey, does that password get in your email? And if it does, I can use it for something. I can sell it to someone else. I then have access to that email. And what most people don't realize is, without the multi-factor piece, if someone gets access to your email, they can reset your password for everything. Mm-hmm. Once they have your email, they can have it all. And so what I usually tell people is if you absolutely cannot remember, more than, they'll say, 2 passwords, never set your email password to the password for everything else. Because at the end of the day, if they can get into Amazon, those things, you can go in and change those. But if they get your email password, you're done. So
the email password is like that final wall in the fortress. If they breach that wall, now you've given away the whole farm.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so multi-factor on email is the most important because, again, if they can reset your email password and take your email, they can reset your password for everything else because most people either don't have multi-factor or they may use that email as their multi-factor. Phishing works similarly. I mean, you may get that text message, you open it, and what people don't realize is, let's say you get a text message from Amazon that says you have your package has been stolen or your credit card's declined.
Yep.
When you click on that and you get that, it looks like Amazon. We can look for spelling errors. We hope that we catch them, but most of the time they're pretty smart. But when you go in to put in that username and password, it's always going to come back as it's incorrect.
Yeah.
But the reason they do that is because you're going to give them the 4 or 5 passwords that you have that you think it might be.
Yep.
So you're going to cycle through them. So on the back end, if I'm a scammer, I've got your email and I've got 5 passwords you might use for any site that you log into.
Fact.
And again,
true story.
And the other piece of that people don't realize is they're probably not going to hack you that day. You're probably not going to see anything from that for a week, a month maybe, because most of the time with these people, they're going to capture that data and they're going to sell it to somebody else. And then those people that are going to sell it to somebody else are in mass and they're going to go because, laws are out there, but a lot of these people operate on anonymity because they're in countries that don't have these laws. They don't have extradition. They're never going to have to pay any consequences for it. So they're going to do it all day long. And so having that data out there, Google's good about, they actually have a password database that pulls from the dark web. So if you put a password, sometimes you'll get a pop-up that says, this password has been found somewhere, please change this now. Mm-hmm. And those are great services to have. They're great services that are out there, but they don't foolproof everything. So the key, again, separate password for email than everything else. Always enable multi-factor for email if nothing else, but as much stuff as you possibly can. Try to use your cell phone for the multi-factor. It is very difficult to clone a cell phone number in the United States. Now, if you from outside the country, now if you're in the United States, there are ways to do that, but most people don't waste their time. They're trying to get the low-hanging fruit. They're trying to hit people as fast as they can, get these lists of people and sell them off to somebody and move on.
And like you were saying, there is enough potential victims out there who aren't thinking that far ahead, that they don't need to clone cell phones. They don't need to do extra steps. There's enough people who will click on that link, go to the fake Amazon site, and put in their password.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, but it's true. And so you spend a lot of time trying to get word out there. Don't do that.
And you know, the phone calls you get where they try to talk you, walk you through the phone and put remote access on your computer and things like that. I mean, those should be red flags for most people. Microsoft's not going to do that. Apple's not going to do that. That's not something they do. But that's actually not the primary. I mean, that's one thing that happens, and a lot of people fall victim to it. But I think most people are pretty good about, okay, well, they probably wouldn't call me. But that login screen, when it looks like Amazon and you click on it, and, you think you're going to the right place, the email address where the name of the person is at Amazon or Amazon services. But when you actually drill down and look at that email address, it's from, heymail.biz or some other website. So you can, you get in there and you start looking at where it's really coming from before you answer those emails. When you start to kind of see those things happening, you'll be more cognizant of it going on. Like you'll see, okay, well, I'm getting this, because it's not only going to get worse. I mean, there are spam blockers out there. Companies are trying really hard, but the reality is a lot of people are using Gmail accounts now. So when you get that email from Norton, if you look, there's a Gmail account behind it. And the reason is because they can't blanket Gmail they can't blacklist it. If you give me a heymail.biz, I can blacklist that on the Gmail side and say nobody comes in with this email address because they're scammers. Yep. But when you put Gmail behind it, I can't do that, because then your grandma can't email you, your sister can't email you, because they all have Gmail accounts. So you'll notice that a lot more, especially now that they're moving to get a little smarter about it.
So what if somebody calls you up and Justin, I received this thing, I clicked on the link, I put in my email and password, I spoke to somebody on the phone, I gave them my credit card number, I gave them my social security number. What advice do you give that person? They've already been victimized. They already fell for it. So
depending on how deep the hack or the victim goes. So if they gave them the credit card information, of course, we're going to reset your credit card. Right now, they're looking for bank accounts. 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask you for your checking account numbers, because it's a lot harder to change that than it is a credit card. I can call today. You can change my credit card. You can ship me a new one. Some banks will print them in-house and give them to you. Your bank account number, that's a whole lot harder to change. You've got a lot of stuff linked to that. Pension accounts, Fidelity, things like that, they're trying to get those nowadays. They're trying to trick you on those, because they'll put loans out against them and get them shipped to them. They'll do all kinds of things. Of course, passwords compromised. You want to change all your passwords. Try to make them as unlike your other passwords as you possibly can. Come up with something completely new. There are... I understand people, and then I get the complexity of them that everybody asks, well, I got to add a symbol now, or an Egyptian hieroglyphic, or whatever it is. But the reality is, the more complex you can make it and still remember it, the more effective it's going to be. But if they go as far as social security number, that's a harder one. There are a lot of companies out there that will help you with your identity at that point. You can set up monitoring, but that's going to be a paid service. So it's not just a matter of canceling something out. It's a matter of paying these. And Symantec actually has one. I think it's called LifeLock. It's Norton's product. You can go with them, and it's a monthly fee, but they'll actually do credit report monitoring. They'll do all this other stuff with you, and they'll kind of keep an eye on it from that point on, and say if something comes up, they flag it. I can tell you, if you get to that point, it can be very difficult to get loans and things from that point, because a lot of that stuff is locked out. And you'll have to jump through a lot of hoops, and they usually do that for years after, just to be on the safe side. So I would say never, ever, ever give your social out online, over the phone, anything like that, unless you absolutely know who you're talking to.
Say that last part again, because we've been shouting that from the rooftops for years now, and I just want to hear it from somebody else now, professional IT guru. Go ahead and say that last part again.
Never give your social security number to anyone that you don't have to. Even most reputable places now, even for loans, will have a space that says optional. So it'll have social security number, but it will say optional. They may ask for the last 4, which is okay. But outside of that, do not give it to anybody. Do not give your full social security number to anybody. There's no way to backtrace.
We're not making this up, folks.
No.
We're not making it up.
You cannot change your social security number. It can't happen. You can change your bank account. You can change those things. Social security number, I've never seen anyone that's been able to change it. Maybe there is a way, but it's not an easy task.
So now, are you accepting new clients for your freelance IT stuff?
Not right now.
Not right now.
Not right now.
So if people wanted to reach out to Justin in a panic, they wouldn't be able to reach you right now?
No, not right now.
Is it not right now?
No.
This guy's too in demand. He's the best doctor in the world. You can't get in to see him anymore.
No, I mean, and most of this stuff is pretty common sense. So whatever IT service you go with, they're going to give you the same advice. It's not, I don't own the patent on this device, but just be very careful. I mean, the idea is that, and you do get a lot of those calls. I was hacked, or they got in my computer, or whatever. The other side is if they have remote access to your computer, you need to take that computer to somebody who can wipe it. You need to wipe Windows back down. You need to get it back to where it was when you first bought it. They can restore most of your files. Best Buy can do it. Staples, places like that, take it in, get that done. Because odds are there's a remote access software on there that they're going to utilize later to get to your stuff. So even if you change all your passwords, change all your stuff, do everything you need to do, they may still have access to your system. You need to make sure you take that away. So if they do gain access, if they do take over your keyboard and mouse, make sure you get that wiped out and cleaned up.
So now I've heard a lot lately talked about as far as making sure if somebody's going to wipe your computer to do a DOD wipe, where they wipe everything off and then write nonsense to the drive and then wipe that off as well. Is that something that you recommend people make sure?
It's definitely something you want to make sure if you give your computer to somebody or you donate it. Okay. So if your computer goes out of your hands for any reason, I mean, maybe your nephew or niece, but even then it's a good idea. What they do is they write ones and zeros to every sector of the drive, and that just, because when you delete something on a computer, it's not actually deleted. It just allocates that space back so that the operating system can write to that later. So if something gets written over it later, it is gone, but the odds of that happening in the next little bit are pretty small. So the idea is that we're going to write something to this that's something relevant that's actually going to overwrite the data that was there before.
Gotcha.
It is never a bad idea. So most of the time it's going to be a little bit of an extra fee. That's fine. It takes more time to do, but it's usually a pretty unattended process for the person doing it. So it's usually not that much more expensive.
Gotcha. So you do agree with them that's a reasonable thing to do?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So I've been hearing more about that. You hear more and more about these things here in recent memory as people's identities are being stolen, as gas pipelines are being shut down by hackers, and the energy grid is being attacked by hackers. Is there any type of software or any type of device that you personally think that people should be looking into? We're not asking him to give a recommendation. This is not Justin's recommendation. He's not endorsing anything. But do you think it's something that if you were in a situation that you would look at, this is a better device than this one, this is a more secure piece of software than this one?
So a lot of times with antivirus, they're willing to give it away for free. And so like Avast does it, AVG, all these companies. But with free, you pretty much, once you get your virus, they can remove it. When you pay for the extra services that all of them offer, they offer a better service, Trend Micro, all these guys, you pay for that internet security piece of it. That's actually an active protection. Mm-hmm. So it's always better. I mean, sometimes I tell people stick with the antivirus if you're not doing anything nefarious, but the reality is if you've got teenagers on it, I mean, they're gonna see a free game they want to download that usually costs $60, but on this website it's free. Mm-hmm. Those are where those problems come from. Torrents and downloading illegal music and things like that. But everybody wants to entice these people to download something free or get something free, and they're going to get something there. With that internet security piece in play, like I said, AVG has it, Avast has it, Trend Micro, they have that extra piece. It does actually actively look for things trying to come in. It has a database. When you go to run an application, it's going to check that application against the database and go, wait a minute, we know this is bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not perfect. Nothing's foolproof, but it's a lot better than I'm going to go ahead and let you run this, and then if it ends up being a virus when I scan later, I'll try to get rid of it.
Gotcha.
Prevention's always easier than treatment.
Understood. Which makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's applied to a bunch of things in our lives. Your health, your car, maintaining your home. Like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you stop it from happening ahead of time, then you don't have to deal with it later. Even protecting your identity and your personal information, because it's easier to stop someone from obtaining it. Just say no to the fake Amazon guy, as opposed to giving them your information, then later on try to assuage the damage. Well, I got to shut down my bank account, my credit card, my bank account number. I got to get a new social security number sometimes, et cetera, et cetera.
And the new buzzword is VPN. Everybody wants to go to VPN for everything, and it's what everybody wants. But VPN doesn't necessarily protect you. It will hide what you're doing from your ISP for the most part, for your internet provider, like Spectrum or whatever. But you can still be hacked there. Encryption's only good. Local encryption's only good if you don't share your password. I mean, encryption's a great thing. If someone steals your laptop and it's locked and your password's locked, there's a chance they can't take the drive out and get your data off. But if they know your password, it doesn't matter. encryption is worthless if you stick your password with a sticky note on top of it so you remember it, and they steal it. Guess what? They have the password. They're past the encryption. It doesn't do any good.
Gotcha.
So
now, denial of service is something that's been a big buzzword here of late since it happened to some prominent people in the public eye. But that's something that like gamers have been dealing with for a while.
Yes, it's very much it's more of a doxing thing nowadays where, maybe you make somebody mad in a game and they can see your IP, so they go run it, and it basically just floods your computer with service attacks, and it eventually just shuts things off, shuts your internet down, or your internet provider sees something quirky and it shuts it down for a temporary amount of time. It's usually not permanent damage, but for major servers, for major companies, it's not usually a huge deal. They have a lot of protection. For small businesses, it can be detrimental. It can take you down for a few days. It can do things to you. So it's usually an attack. It's not so much to gain entry. It's more to shut you down or disrupt your service or disrupt you in some way.
Now, is that something that there is a way? Does a VPN help you to avoid that? Is that something that there's a way to avoid it?
Not really. I mean, there's ways to hide your public IP. The bigger problem for businesses is ransomware. So ransomware is kind of its own monster. It goes into your computer, takes over, and then locks all your data. So it's not so much about stealing your data. It's because they don't even have to have access to your data. It can be encrypted, doesn't matter. They can actually still encrypt over top of your encryption. So maybe they can't get to all your data, but they can keep you from getting to it. And for businesses, it can be detrimental. For people, it can be your family photos, the things that you've been storing, your QuickBooks files, those kind of things. So again, they may not be able to steal the data, but they'll lock it and then ask you to give them money to unlock it, to get the key to unlock it.
Oh, yeah. Just 10 Bitcoins and I'll unlock it. So how do we avoid that? How do we protect against that?
So it's the same method. So there are internet security protection is now, most of them, I know Trend Micro, Bitdefender, pretty sure Avast's Upgrade, they all have the ransomware so they look for encryption, they shut it down. So if it's Microsoft encryption or whatever, sometimes that can cause problems if you try to use third-party encryptions, but you can work through those things with the vendor. But for the most part, it's just a matter of keeping your data secure, keeping access to your computer unsecure. Because again, they're not really going to be able to just get into your computer for nothing. You have to let them in most cases. So you either let them in by following a link on a site that says download this application, or you're going to let them in by them calling you on the phone and you installing what they tell you to install, and then they get in there and encrypt everything.
So it's not commonplace that you show up to your business the next day and walk in and it's locked up. It's
not that commonplace. Now, if you leave yourself susceptible, like let's say you leave a remote desktop open so that you can get to your office at home, those are ways that they can get in. It's really kind of frowned upon nowadays to do that. Most of the stuff is in the cloud. Most of the stuff runs through various servers. Small businesses like to give that access because they don't have that anywhere else, or they get that in the cloud and they want to have that at home. But anytime you open that stuff up outside the office, you're leaving yourself open to attacks.
Gotcha.
So it's always better if you're in an office and you have to have something on-prem to keep it on-prem and only on-prem.
What's on-prem?
On premises. So you have a server that's in the office, that only accessible in the office, that's not available to the internet. It can access the internet, but there's no open ports or anything coming in to be able to get to that device.
Gotcha.
There are ways, there are VPNs that you can utilize. It's called a private VPN that basically lets you connect directly to your office. That's a secure way to get in if you want to do that. But just leaving your remote desktop open to the public is never a good idea.
Understood. I think that we've gotten a huge amount of information about how our small business owners and them as individuals can work towards protecting their identity and their information and the information for their business. Do you have any final advice beyond have a different password for your email? But do you have any final advice? I usually phrase it like this: if you remember nothing else, remember this.
I don't know if I have a blanket one. I would just say be smart. I mean, when you go into scenarios when you're in a store and you see somebody doing something shady, or there's some things happen on the internet. When you see something that looks fishy, when you see misspellings in websites that they link you to, when you get you'll get like a TLS error. They'll say this site is not secure, and you can click advanced and you can move forward. There's probably a reason it's not secure. There's probably somebody trying to redirect you or get in between that site. Sites can get hacked just like you can. So sometimes those sites get compromised, and then you're putting your data out there to them. So just keep your eyes out. I mean, look for things that seem fishy. Microsoft calling you on the phone, that's not going to happen. They don't have any incentive to do that. Apple the same way. Unless you called them for support, there's no reason for them to call you.
We've talked about that a lot, where people, especially with what we do, they get calls from, up from the IRS, and we're sending somebody to arrest you unless you pay your tax debt with Apple Music cards.
Yes, and that's another huge, and I mean, Visa gift cards, it's a huge red flag. Why would the government ask for Apple Music cards?
Yep.
But people get so panicked, they're in anxiety, they're not thinking, and they move through it. So sometimes you have to take a deep breath. You have to look at the situation and go, okay, am I making this better or making this worse?
Yeah.
Is what he telling me to do going to make this better, or is it going to make it worse? And at that point, realize that they're really trying to scam you and you need to get off the phone.
Yeah, we usually use the litmus test of, is this reasonable?
Yes.
IRS accepting the form of payment, Apple Music cards. Is that reasonable? It's not reasonable. Microsoft calling because they think your computer's in danger. Is that reasonable? It's not reasonable. So, if you remember nothing else, use the litmus test. Is this reasonable? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And you can even get emails from your own boss. You could have their name on it, but not their email address. So always check that. Be careful because, let me see all the financials for this year, or let me know what the bank account number is. Again, I lost it, and it'll be their name in that email. But if you click on the email address, you'll see it's not them. So if there's an unreasonable request from them or something that looks a little fishy, it's never a bad thing to check, or even double check with them. Hey, I saw an email from you that said, give them a call or text them. I saw an email from you that said you want all these bank statements or you want all this information. Is that from you? I'm just double checking. I mean, that's a multi-factor on your part. You're doing an extra step to make sure that's what it's there, because it's your job may be on the line in a situation like that.
Yep, I like that. So it's basically an in situ multi-factor authentication, just on the fly. When we do see that, email from your employer, real quick, I need a copy of your W-2 right now. Well, your employer has your W-2, and they don't need you to send it to them, and they certainly don't need it right away. And check the email address. It's from xyz.co or something like that. So,
and I can think of very few reasons that anyone would get upset if you asked a clarifying question or took it a step further. Like, look, you asked me for this. I'm just making sure this is 100%. I'm sure they would appreciate that because it's their data too that can be compromised.
True story. Well, Justin, we appreciate you being here with us and letting us look behind the veil of the IT guru a little bit. And we definitely appreciate all the information you brought to us. If you have any questions about it, anything that you heard on the podcast today, hit us up at info@amsdynamics.com, and we'll get that question over to Justin over there, but he doesn't have time to answer, so don't worry about it.
I'll do my best.
Just kidding. We'll do our best. Thank you for being here, Small Business Superheroes Podcast. Thank you again, Justin Kennedy.
Extra, the Small Business Superheroes Podcast on all of your favorite podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Anchor, iHeartRadio, and many more. Small Business Superheroes is powered by AMSDynamics.com.